Would you like to hear what I got?
What you got?
I got an interview with somebody. And we're going to play it here in a second because, folks, as you may know, it's been in all the papers. The season 5 of Dark Side of the Ring has debuted, premiered on Vice TV. It's still around, folks. They haven't taken it away from us yet. Tuesday nights at 10 o'clock Eastern time. There's going to be 10 episodes this season. We just talked about on the Drive-Thru a couple of days ago. The debut was on Earthquake John Tenta. And today, well, actually not today because this is a previously recorded conversation, but I was able to catch up on the phone with Evan Husney, who along with Jason Eisner are the producer, director, and creative forces behind Dark Side of the Ring. And we talked about the various episodes this season, including the ones that I'm going to be a part of. So, Brian, if you have the ability to punch the button and get that queued up, we will now go to the interview that I conducted, because he's a busy man. I had to get him when I could. Day before yesterday on the phone with Evan Husney. All righty, we have made the connection, and once again joining us, one of the major domos of the Dark Side of the Ring series. I can never remember producer, director. You guys do everything. You're literally twin sons of different mothers, but we got one half of them. The other one is temporarily on assignment with Walter Cronkite, but welcome back to the program, Evan Husney.
Oh, thanks so much, Jim. It's another year, another season. It's great to be back talking to you about it, so I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
And of course, we're making fun of Jason Eisner. He's not really on assignment with Walter Cronkite because Walter Cronkite's been dead for 40 years, but nevertheless, I hate that we couldn't work out on our schedules. Everything's been so crazy, but the folks have already seen the season 5 premiere episode on Earthquake John Tenta, and that was such a sad story again, because he was such a nice guy, and Brian and I are going to be discussing more. It's at some point, I don't know where we are in time here, but this was one of the examples of a kinder, gentler Dark Side of the Ring, because even though this was a sad story, it was about a swell guy, as they used to say, and it had a lot of uplifting principle to it. He was not his own worst enemy, as some of your subjects are. So that had to be kind of a more what's the word I'm searching for? A more cathartic episode to have some good feelings come out.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, I was a big Earthquake fan. I was a fan of all the big men of the 80s wrestling when I was a kid. Bam Bam Bigelow, the Natural Disasters, et cetera, et cetera. But this was definitely a subject I never really thought would be a fit for the show, or considered until recently, when we were kind of doing a thought experiment on other types of different episodes. Could we sort of expand what the scope of what we're looking at for the series? And when we kind of were like, whoa, what about John Tenta? And I remembered a friend of mine, Mike Lawrence, he's a comedian and he's also a comedy writer. He suggested it to me and gave me this backstory on John Tenta that I didn't really know. I didn't know. I mean, I knew he was a sumo wrestler in Japan, but I didn't know to the extent. And just this kind of fascinating background in which how he came into the wrestling business. And he intimated that there was kind of a very emotional family story there. And I remember when we sort of, as a thought experiment, we're like, okay, what does this look like? And we started to reach out to his family and speak to them. We just kind of fell in love with them, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
They're just such likable, amazing people. And they are the heroes of this episode. And that just really resonated with us in just a huge way. The fact that, he is this, John Tenta was a gentle giant. He had that side to him, but he also was this, monstrous heel, in the 80s WWF. So there's that contrast. But in all honesty, it was just kind of really just loving the hell out of his family and just wanting to do this episode. They were very excited about it. And I thought it was just a chance for us just to give for fans to see a different side of him. Maybe they didn't know his real story or what a great guy he was. And I think it was like 10 or so years ago when his son posted this amazing photo on social media of John Tenta laying on his couch with his kids playing Game Boy. And that just just really hit home for me. Like, wow, like that says everything. What a great dude, you know?
Well,
And so, I don't know.
his like you said, his family, his wife and his daughter was so cheerful, and his sons, they're like central casting for normal people that you just like because they're camera friendly, even though they're normal.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just so pleasant. And I knew, most of John's background, and especially in the mid '80s when we were all able to finally get the Japanese videotapes in the mail and blah blah blah, and had seen him before he became Earthquake and knew the sumo background also.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that I was astonished, I never realized I'm older than he was. Because he was so, he's like Dennis Condrey. People say Dennis Condrey looked like he was 40 since he was 20. But
Yeah.
I get because of he went bald prematurely, and just he was big and had that you would have thought that but he was only 24 years old, whatever, 25 or whatever, when he's working with Hogan.
Mm-hmm.
It was just
insane.
amazing.
Insane. Yeah. Like that's definitely, that era of wrestler is something, man, I really miss, to be quite frank, is wrestlers who just looked and were, looked many years older than they actually are. I don't know how else to put it that way,
like
but
grown
it's just
adults, even when they weren't grown adults. Well, and the
yeah.
thing, also, it's a tribute to his athletic ability. And of course, he had, played sports in school, but when he debuted in Japan, until the time that he was working on top in the WWF, wasn't 2 or 3 years. And for a guy that size to be able to, like Yokozuna, what an amazing natural athlete, for a guy that size to be able to move it in a controlled way, to not kill people in that fashion. There was amazing natural inclination toward being able to learn how to work at that stage of the game. But
yeah, and one last thing too I forgot to mention about it was when we did the episode, like I said, we did it out of just, being so enamored with Tenta's family. But when we did the interviews and they came back and we're watching it, we're piecing together the episode, we're like, holy crap, this is one of the most heartbreaking episodes we've ever put together. Who would have thunk it?
Yeah.
And a lot, I just, a lot of people may think it's not quite a fit for the show, but I have to say that I think it's pretty dark, when someone who's so beloved and has such a strong connection with their family is taken away from them. I almost can't even think of anything darker, And so, but it does also shine a light on the fact that, what a great person he was. And it is sad to think about that nobody, from the business was there, in his final days. And the fact that after his wrestling career faded, he had to work retail and things like that. Those are things I didn't know.
Yeah, well, I did not know that as well, that it got to that point where he not only was working retail, but he had another job doing, what was it?
A truck driver.
Driver. Can you imagine?
No.
You're, sitting there at the grocery and a truck pulls up with the produce and it's Earthquake driving it.
Yeah. It's wild.
But yeah, and that's also with a show like this, or a subject like this, it's a way for you to actually tell the story of somebody that deserves to have their story told while still fitting
right
in some, aspect with your motif. Because with a lot of the episodes, and we'll get to those here in 1 second, it's, there's always some element of, yes, this is tragic, but boy, so-and-so brought it on themselves. But but this was not the case here. But let's talk about some of the folks that were, of course, Tuesday nights at 10 o'clock Eastern on Vice TV. And if you're not in Eastern time, then do your math. I can't do it for you. But that's where we're going to see Dark Side of the Ring for the following next 9 weeks, right? We got 9 more episodes to go. Who's on tap?
Well, the second episode of season 5 is going to be another episode I never would have thought we would have done for the series. That might be a theme here, but is Buff Bagwell. Obviously growing up right in the pocket of 90s, WCW, NWO, definitely obviously remember him as a fixture of the NWO, one of the arrogant heels of that group. And I'd heard rumblings of his story. Obviously he's had some challenges with addiction and crashed his car several times.
Trials and tribulations.
Trials and tribulations. Yeah, exactly. And you hear about that stuff, and then you heard his post wrestling career was sort of being a male escort and
Buff Bigelow, male gigolo.
Yeah, and appearing on reality TV shows involving that. But I have to be honest with you, I was someone who was very dubious if this would be a fit for the show, and admitted, probably wrongfully. But when we started filming this and getting the interviews of some of the people that his family, ex-wives, childhood friends, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's some of the craziest stories we've ever captured for any of the episodes.
Well, that's what I was about to say. For people who may say, well, Buff Bagwell used to be my favorite wrestler. Now, come to think of it, nobody's ever said that. But for people who say Buff Bagwell, the outside the ring stuff that wasn't on television has a lot more potential for entertainment than some of the stuff that was on television, doesn't it?
Oh my God. Well, one of the things that I did not know going into this was that there was a domestic altercation before Buff got into the wrestling business. There was a huge altercation between his dad and his mom, Judy Bagwell, of course, who would actually become a part of the wrestling business
who would later on become a noted pole sitter.
Yeah, right. Exactly. In WCW. But there was a huge altercation between his mom and his dad, and, a young Buff, he was scared. He went and grabbed a fucking gun and shot his dad, which I did not know. Did you know this?
I was not aware of this one.
He shot his dad. His dad survived, and he's actually in the episode. And they both talk about this, very defining moment in their personal history, and they were able to obviously come together in the end. But it just, the environment that Buff grew up in, because he did grow up pretty much, like his family was in the Georgia area where they grew up, they were known to everybody. They had a lot of money. They had a very successful family business, and a lot of it came crashing down. And it just sounded, the insanity of what was going on in that household is on like a 10. So that I didn't know. So all that stuff is going to be a surprise to everybody. Obviously, his run-ins with the law, his problems with addiction, and of course the male escort era of his career, and he does have a redemption, and you can tell that a lot of people really care about him. They want the best for him, and want to see the best for him. And now in terms of where he's at in life, it seems like he's come out the other side. So there is a redemptive quality to the story, but this is a roller coaster ride of an episode, I will say.
I always thought that the handsome stranger never got a chance to get over. That gimmick could have been WrestleMania main event worthy.
Well, the American males too, and him with Scotty Riggs, and who's also in the episode.
Well, actually, those gimmicks actually did stand a chance. But did you study the handsome stranger era?
I think he gets a mention. I think he gets a mention in there.
I think it was a collaboration, I think, between Joe Pedicino and Burt Prentice, that gimmick. He was masked, and he had the flowers that he would bring to a select young lady at ringside in the Sportatorium in Dallas, where there were 200 people, and the prettiest young lady at ringside probably was wearing an oxygen tank and using a walker. But I always got a kick out of that one. But we will anxiously await learning more about Buff Bagwell's outside the ring activities than some of the inside the ring stuff. Although it's got potential as well.
He broke his neck on television.
He's got that going for him.
Don't forget that. I mean, it's crazy.
For all the people who say, well, that can't happen. It did happen. It can happen again anytime, the way things are going. So, and then we move to
Terry Gordy.
Week number 3. That's one that I'm looking forward to quite extensively. And I know we did this. I'm not trying to shoehorn myself into all these things. I know that we talked about Terry at length when we shot, but who were you able to get, and how much fun was that putting together? Go back, watch some of that old footage.
Oh, I mean, Terry Gordy is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. And it was an honor to do this episode, something we actually have wanted to do for a very long time in some capacity. Either a Terry Gordy show or a Fabulous Freebirds show is something that's always been super high on our list to do. And it was reaching out to the Gordy family and wanting to make sure that they wanted this to happen, to participate in it, which they did. So the episode features both of his children, Ray Gordy and of course Miranda Gordy, who's a wrestler nowadays, and yourself. This is Jim Cornette's first appearance in season 5, and we talked to Kevin Sullivan. We talked to David Manning, of course, the ref from World Class. Jimmy Garvin is in the episode. Mick Foley is in the episode. And I think one of his friends who was on that fateful flight where Terry had the big overdose. Which of course is the incident that sort of changed his personality. But it was awesome to be able to go back, to watch all the footage, to highlight his time in Japan. I mean, watching his matches in Japan, I mean, there's nothing like it. And being able to spotlight the greatest tag team name ever in wrestling is when he teamed with Dr. Death, and they were the Miracle Violence Connection. My favorite tag name ever. Amazing stuff to see that. A lot of footage of Dr. Death, like that, that we used in terms of like interviews he's given about Terry. There's interviews Terry's given that is in there.
The thing about Terry is that the start of his career perfectly coincided with the start of the videotape era, where people were just starting to get the VHS machine. So you've got the IWA saved their footage, so you can see Terry Mecca when he was 14 years old. And of course, you can't see anything from the Culkins in Mississippi, where he really, started growing up. But then there's the Freebirds debut on Memphis television. And you can, then when you go to Japan, you can see he was literally growing up in front of our eyes, because when we first saw him here in this territory, he was 16 years old. And then he's 18 and he's a Freebird, and then they're in the Superdome, and then he's going to Japan by the time he's 22 years old. But he was 4 and 250 when he was 16. So he grew up in terms of his career and his talent and his blossoming as a worker, but he was always a big kid from Chattanooga.
Yeah, and that's something we do highlight too, is that I think he is one of the youngest people to break into professional wrestling. Because I know he was working well before he could legally drive, I think, right? Was it like 14 or something?
Yeah.
So you see that, and that's amazing. And then by the time he's 18, he's like, he's fully formed and kicking ass. And obviously with the overdose that he suffered, on the trip to Japan, and of course went into the coma, and he was never the same after that. Just the contrast that viewers will see from who Terry was before, to after, is very heartbreaking. And the testimonials from his children really do as you'll see in the episode, what hold a lot of this together in terms of their strength and what they had to go through and what they saw and how difficult it was for them. I think this episode does give just as a totally new perspective on Terry, and what everybody, what he was going through and what the challenges he had and what everybody else did as well. It's a very sad story, but it's also great to be able to spotlight truly one of the best in the ring ever, for my money.
Well, how are you going to follow that?
Brutus, the barber beefcake.
Now, now, do you get to the bottom of the question that is on everybody's mind about Brutus the Barber Beefcake and his life and career in this episode? Do you do investigative reporting? Do you delve deep and find out just exactly when Missy Beefcake became his manager? She suddenly popped up on TV last year, as his manager / wife, and then all I've heard about her on Twitter and the internet since then is that Greg Valentine don't like her.
Well, I mean, she's definitely been a divisive personality to Brutus's friends. And this episode, one part of this episode is it does chronicle the decades-long friendship, of course, between him and Hulk Hogan, right? They broke into the business around the same time. Wherever Hulk goes, Brutus went.
Yeah.
And obviously the episode also gets into the horrifying parasailing accident that almost totally obliterated his face. And I remember I was reading Brutus's autobiography at one point, and the chapter where he talks about what happened was so gruesome and visceral that it made me ill. It made me physically ill. Like how he described what happened, to his face and everything. And there's a part in there where, and we get into this to tie it back to the Hogan friendship, is like, I think Brutus's parents had recently passed away by that point in time. So like his sort of closest person in life, his next of kin, if you will, wasn't a family member. It really was Hulk Hogan. And because they wanted someone to sit bedside with him that had a recognizable voice to him, right?
Yeah.
And so they picked Hogan, and Hogan shows up and he's the guy taking care of him. And then there's that horrifying story where Hogan takes him out of the bed and walks him down the hospital hallway so he can, walk around a little bit, and his eyeball popped out, and like, okay, brother, let's put you back to bed, brother, or whatever. And so it was just like, oh my God, so when
when Hogan tells the story, his brain fell out his eye socket.
Right, exactly. And Harley Race lit it on fire. When we did the Marty Jannetty episode last season, we interviewed Brutus and Mrs. Beefcake, and we were just like, well, this is a pretty interesting stuff going on down here. Maybe Brutus could be an episode, and maybe that could be something. And we started talking to him about it, and then my team was talking to me about it, like, could we do it? And I basically was like, well, we're definitely getting into the parasailing accident, and we'll talk about the friendship, but we will only do this if we find the man who reconstructed Brutus's face. And lo and behold, we found the plastic surgeon, who of course is a character. Of course he is. And so this episode kind of gets a little bit into if there's like a medical reality show version of Dark Side of the Ring.
Oh, now wait a minute. Is there going to be a viewer discretion on this? I don't like that medical stuff going on my television.
There might be a picture or two, but not like, deeply graphic, long holding video footage or anything. But it's pretty crazy, man. It's definitely crazy. And I'll tell you what, well, you've seen the pictures that I've taken when you've been here of Hogan and Beefcake when they were in Memphis as the Terry and Eddie Boulder. Yeah.
And Hogan looks reasonably, besides the fact that he's, somewhat balder and older, he looks reasonably like the same human being. But remember, old Eddie Boulder had that long, blonde, bleached. Yeah. He looked like he was the lead singer of Whitesnake. And that, the physique and everything. And Brutus, the barber, has changed in 45 years, I guess it was.
Yeah.
But did you also find the guy that either arrested him or turned him in for the transit authority fiasco?
Oh, man, I mean, it's kind of, how could you not touch on that if you're going to do this? So of course we did. Yeah, there is a little section in there talking about the anthrax scare, which,
And we're not talking about the band Anthrax, since I just mentioned Whitesnake.
Right.
For those of you, and Brian and I referred to it on the program a week or two ago, but Brutus somehow ended up with a job at it was the subway, right?
Yeah.
He's selling tickets.
The Boston Transit Authority or whatever.
Yeah.
Working. Yeah. Is it in the,
He's selling tickets, and he leaves his cocaine in such a visible position that people called it in because they thought it was an anthrax fucking situation, and he shut down the fucking Boston subway system.
Right. Well, of course he calls it something else, but it was a white powdery substance that was left behind, and the worker, the person taking over his shift, um, you know, came into the booth and saw it, and then that was of course the time when those things were, when the word anthrax was in the newspapers, and yeah, it was a whole shutdown. It was on the news. It was like on the news. Like it was a big. He like Mr. Magoo'd himself into that, shutting down all of the Boston Transit or whatever, which I love. That's just amazing.
Well, but again, if Missy had been his manager then, she could have got it straightened out.
Perhaps.
That's probably why he brought her on board, to take care of these public relations fiascos.
Perhaps.
So where are we going on week 5?
Very excited for the next one, which is the Harley race episode.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this. Obviously, as you and I discussed in the episode, one of the toughest men ever in wrestling. And somebody who endured so much, in terms of what he put himself through physically in the ring and for as long as he did. And someone who also endured a lot of personal tragedy, with the passing of his wife and the auto accident, and everything that happened to him later in his career. And so we definitely touch on all of that. But the most exciting thing about this episode is the absolute treasure trove of never before seen video and photos that we were able to get for this episode. It is the largest, most amazing collection of stuff that we've ever gotten for any episode. It was amazing.
That's what I was going to ask you about. It includes the oldest video that we know that exists of Harley in the ring, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So it was a Justin, his son, and Yvonne, his ex-wife, basically said they were going to send a small box of stuff. And, shout out to John Boucher, who works on the show with us, doing a lot of the archive research. They sent him a 3 foot by 3 foot box, like a hand truck, like a guy from FedEx with a hand truck brought it up to his apartment. And they went, and basically I think somebody had gone through Harley's storage space and just unloaded anything related to wrestling and put it in that box. And you had reels and reels of old 8mm film, quad reels, VHS tapes, photo albums, loose photos. Oddly enough, a furry toilet seat was included from the 70s in this box. Not sure what that relates to, but that was in there. His actual wedding album, like from his wedding with, was amazing. But yeah, the footage you're referring to is, and John, from his research has indicated that it's the earliest known wrestling footage he's ever seen. It's very quite possible that somewhere in the WWE warehouse, there's maybe some AWA footage, or there's some Florida stuff that's never been seen, maybe that's in there. But as far as what's available to us, it is from his first or second tour of Japan. And because you can tell, because he has like the dyed blonde hair and he's got the handsome Harley jacket. So it's got to be 68 or 69 from when the footage is from. And it's just amazing to see, because not only do you see him in the ring, but you see sort of like this 8mm travelogue footage of him, wandering around Japan. You see him on a bullet train just hanging out with Giant Baba and his wife. And it's like this amazing, film footage, which we transferred. And it's just, it's crazy. But I think so that's amazing. But my favorite thing that was included was, and this is going to blow people's minds, it was 8mm footage of a house party that the Harleys hosted with the Funks. So you actually see all this footage of Harley and his wife, Terry Funk, Dory Funk Sr. and Jr. just hanging out, drinking, smoking cigars, dancing in Harley's house in the late 60s. And they're all just hanging out. And you just never see footage of, especially guys like that, just hanging out and being themselves, That's
wild.
It's going to blow people's minds.
Well, yeah. And you mentioned, Harley, not only did he do a lot of damage to his body in the ring and had a tremendous pain threshold and ability to just power through it, but also the the other physical damage he'd done to himself in a major car wreck when they wanted to
Yeah.
amputate his leg when he was
Right.
just starting in the wrestling business, and
Mm-hmm.
boating later on, boating accidents, and just various things because he put a lot of miles on his chassis in his life, and
Definitely.
I'm surprised that that he was able to go as long as he did without suffering so many of the effects that he had later on in his life. But just one of the most fascinating people and one of the most influential guys in the ring in the modern wrestling era.
And something you said in the episode is sort of making the distinction of like he is such a connection to the early days of wrestling because he started in the carnival circuit,
Yeah.
and
And the Zabiscos, because
right.
obviously they were close to 80 or thereabouts at that point in time, but with Harley being a teenager and training with the Zabiscos, who were literally, especially Stanislaus, was not only world champion but a pioneer of when organized pro wrestling was being formed in the
Mhm.
19 teens. He had such an incredible old school, not just the holds he was taught or the things in the ring, but the way of looking at the business and understanding the business. He was, first broken in by these people that were involved in inventing it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, which is amazing. It's amazing. So that's all covered in there. One more thing about the archive that was funny. In the box that was sent from the family, there was a VHS tape that was labeled like handwritten that said Harley's Greatest Matches VHS tape. And we're like, oh shit,
Oh,
here it
shit.
is. Here's the gold mine. And John went to put it in his VCR and he played it. And unfortunately, Harley had taped over that, and it had taped Fletch 2 over that.
Oh,
So-
my God.
So unfortunately, that's all that was on there. Yeah. God damn it.
I can see him now. Hey, greatest match. The fucking Fletch is on.
Yeah, exactly. Fletch 2, mind you. And then yeah, but it's fascinating. This episode is obviously gets into the legendary career, but also the tall tale legends of Harley as well. And he's somebody that it seemed to me that he didn't tell a lot of the true, like the stories or really disputed much of anything that occurred in his life. He sort of liked to let these stories live on as legends. That's at least the impression that I get. And so there is a lot of distinction between, what in some of these wilder, crazier stories that people have told over the years, what's the, did they happen? Did they happen slightly differently? Has it taken on a life of its own? And that's always kind of fun to consider.
Yeah, because Harley always had that twinkle in his eye and kind of look out the corner of his eye when people are talking about something, like let him believe whatever the fuck. It's more fun that way. He'll sit back and listen.
Totally. 100%. Yeah. And I love that. I love that.
That's again, hopefully Harley's his main heyday came before the modern pay-per-view era, but at the same time, he's one of those guys that was an influence on so many talents, and so many people still talk about him and with reverence, whether it be everybody from Ric Flair to CM Punk, that hopefully the modern audience will still, they need to hear more detail about this guy and see some of this footage because they probably just heard stories. But I think that he's one of those guys that still, his name has lived on with a modern audience that, might want to find out, where all this craziness came from.
I definitely think that, your younger fan, your more casual fan is going to walk away with a lot more respect for Harley and how he did pioneer a lot of that hard hitting, heavy hitting, wild style. Definitely 100%, because people my age, unfortunately, they might only know him from his King Harley race days,
Yeah.
if you don't do your homework, so
Father Time catches up with all of us. But that was the thing I've, made a comment when we were talking about somebody a while back that passed away. It was Rocky Johnson. I said,
right.
I'd been watching Rocky Johnson, but Harley Race comes into territory. And immediately Rocky Johnson has the best match I've ever seen him in. And then later on, I saw him with so-and-so, and well, he's that guy, the best match I've ever seen. And the common factor was Harley. It was amazing. And the bumps, just not only the constant motion, but the perfect, safe landing every time, over and over. It wasn't safe cumulatively, but in the long run. But, that was the thing for years. Harley was going from town to town, having the best match with insert name here in the local territory that the fans there had ever seen that guy have.
And it wasn't even filmed, probably. So he was. Oh,
no, most of them weren't. No.
Yeah, he's probably taking these insane bumps and risks and, being slammed on the concrete and whatever night after night. And he's kind of just tearing the house down wherever he goes. But
well, and that was the thing that with, because I'd seen Jack Briscoe was an incredible worker, right? And Dory Funk Jr. was also, but in world title matches, they would have their match a lot more than sometimes the local heroes match or local challengers match. With Harley, because of his style, he could let the local guy do his shit and just take bumps for it. And it was a better showcase of the local guy. And made him stronger in the long run, because otherwise everybody's like, fuck, Briscoe and Funk are just tying these motherfuckers up, or wrestling. And if you went to a territory that wasn't particularly raised on that, anyway.
Well, and speaking of Jack Briscoe, we also were able to get Gerald Briscoe in the episode. So it's the first time he's ever sat for our cameras, and he's in another episode later on this season. But just so great to talk to Gerald. He's just amazing. He's the best.
And Jerry was there for so much through so many, turbulent moments in wrestling history, from the late 60s through, 2 years ago or whatever. He's been around so long, and he's seen so much of this stuff. And he's been involved in pivotal points. And another one of your subjects you alluded to, but where are we at on week 6? Have we got there yet?
Oh yeah. Another episode that I'm so looking forward to people checking out, which is the Chris Colt episode, which is definitely something that you and I had talked about like years ago, I feel like, as a potential for this. And I'd always seen photographs of him. There's not much footage that's out there of Chris Colt, but
we looked.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, right. Yeah, I know. But just really one of the best wrestlers that you've never heard of is what I would categorize him. Just an amazing, pioneering, well before his time, sort of psychedelic rock and roll wrestler. Incredible, doing very much an Alice Cooper vibes in what his persona looked like at his prime. And I remember just being so enraptured by the photographs and wanting to know more. And then, of course, you maybe on the podcast or in other places, or just, when we were together, told me about the story where, this is kind of the lifestyle the guy had, is he would, he took a bunch of acid and went out to the ring and, it was a cage match, and then the acid peaked, and all of a sudden he's, hallucinating that giant spiders are taking over the cage and trying to destroy him from within.
And I can't take credit for this story, because all the guys who had known Chris during the time he was in the business, and the guys from the Pacific Northwest and the people who were around him, they have kept this story alive. But it's one of the more fascinating ones, and I mentioned it to you. But I've termed him also. We've talked about him a lot here on the show. The best wrestler nobody ever saw, or the best wrestler nobody remembers, or whatever.
There you go.
And it was because he was so fascinating. And he was, once again, this is a guy who, because of his personal habits and choices, even though a lot of people liked him, and he, as a wrestling fan, you would look and say, that guy's a great wrestler, but he was his own worst enemy. And that's why he didn't make it bigger in a lot of cases, and didn't stay places longer. But when you, not only, every time I saw him, he would get over with people. And I shared with you the video footage. 7 seconds of it may make the show. But he was one of the opponents when they reunited the Fabulous Fargos, Jackie and Don and Roughhouse, in 1975 in Memphis, and drew huge houses all over the territory. It was Chris Colt and his valet / brother Bill Colt, who was Billy Anderson from Phoenix as
He's
an
in the episode.
18-year-old kid. I'm good. I
Yeah.
love Bill Anderson, but he was 18 years old and wanted to get in the wrestling business, and he gets taken to Tennessee with this fucking maniac.
Trial by fire. Yeah.
And then Bill Dundee was the third partner because, as we've talked about, hippie Mike Boyette was too crazy for that group, and they got in a fight. But the point is, I saw him. I'd never seen him before. And yes, it's against the Fargos, but he was a one-man show. Even Bill Dundee, who's out there taking bumps and shit.
Mm-hmm.
Colt's at another level. And Roughhouse hits him over the head with the chair, and the chair horse collars him, a folding chair. And Colt turns around and takes a bump over the top rope with a chair still folded up around his neck.
Mm-hmm.
Or he'd go upside down in the turnbuckles. He'd do the splash off the top where he would bounce on his stomach and bounce to his back. And at the same time, because you could tell he was just a weird personality, he could project that, and he would get tons of heat from the people, not just because he was taking these bumps, but he got under their skin. But you'd see him just long enough to say, wow, I like all the shit that guy's doing. And then he's gone.
Yeah. And I can't remember exactly the territory or the year off the top of my head, but I mean, when you mention him being a heel, I mean, I think he went on television and burned an American flag.
Goddamn, was that when he was Chris Von Colt?
I think so.
In Birmingham Continental.
Possibly. It's been a minute since I've watched the episode and worked on it, but yeah, I mean, you talk about that. I think he was also doing the kind of Randy Savage style top rope elbow drop in the 70s, which is pretty cool. Just
on those concrete rings that they had small territories. And even before this, he was partners with Don Fargo, and they did the various chain gang gimmicks and incarnations. And that's probably where he probably had the most success and actually lasted the longest. That was only a couple of year period, but they were AWA World Tag Team Champions and, used well all over the place. But there you've got two guys that weren't going to stay anywhere for too long. It's amazing they lasted that long. And then, unfortunately, Colt not only didn't work a lot of the big money territories, but didn't work a lot of the territories that saved any of their video libraries. So you don't really see much, but then the out of the ring stories are again even more bizarre, and there's an element of mystery to this. Why I was always intrigued by him, because even his friends lost track of him, and there was rumors that he was dead or alive, and then he shows up at his friend Dean Silverstone's record store one time, right? Just out of nowhere. And oh my gosh, and then they find out he's in a homeless shelter or died in the homeless shelter of AIDS, and nobody knew. It's just he could this could be one of those unsolved mysteries where what really happened to Chris Colt. Is he really dead? Who knows for sure?
Yeah, I mean, the episode definitely answers a lot of that. I remember I tweeted out at some point during season 3 or something, just expressing publicly like I'd like to do a Chris Colt episode. And I remember I got a message from this guy named Ty, who was his, I guess you call it, grand nephew. I don't know how that works out, but he messaged me and was like, if you ever decide to do it, like, we're the family and we'd like to talk to you about it. And he had, which is in the episode, and we really utilized it quite a lot, which you'll see in the episode, which is very different for us, is Chris Colt's diary.
Oh my God.
Is a big part of the episode. So you see, we show kind of the writing of his diary on the screen, and we had someone narrate it just so you can there's some way to bring it to life. But it's him in his own words telling a lot of stuff about his story. And of course, with someone like Chris Colt, you don't know exactly how much of it is, if it's true or not or whatever. But he talks about meeting Janis Joplin in the late 60s and things like that, on the street, and all these just crazy escapades and things like that, because he idolized Janis Joplin. I mean, that was his, that was his idol.
Well, and if he's writing it for himself, then he probably was being more honest, one would think. And and that's because, again, he was a fan of wrestling as a kid. And Tom Burke had mentioned, the great historian in the Northeast, had mentioned that, he was pen pals, because Tom was, I think, in the 50s when they had the Pony Express, Tom Burke was trading programs. But it was like early 60s. He's been pen pals with this kid from out west, and all of a sudden he shows up working for Tony Santos, the Outlaw promotion up there in Boston, and training. And he's like, wow, he moved all the way across the country to do this.
Yeah, and shout out to Tom Burke, by the way, because he's great in the episode. And being able to talk to him was amazing. Obviously super respected wrestling historian. He had tons of photos of Chris Colt, which is awesome. Just any footage or photos is welcome for this. And he was a pen pal with Chris from a very long time, and up until, I think, for a while. I think they were in communication for a long time, and Tom reads the last letter he got from Chris in the episode, and so that's really cool. And then one of the big mysteries, which I guess, I don't know, we got to get people to watch this because you might not know Chris Colt, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. But you had mentioned in the episode something to the effect of, well, people hadn't heard from him for years, and then he shows up in an adult film, right?
Yeah.
And so we were able to track down the director of said adult film, which is amazing. And so he had a completely different point of view and relationship to not only just wrestling, but to Chris, and provided us with a lot of amazing footage. For example, I can't remember.
Wait a minute. Now is Vice dropping some of their network practices now for this type of footage?
Whoops, I didn't mean that. But there's other types of footage where I think he had interviewed Chris. Just sitting around smoking cigarettes, talking about life and things he'd experienced. So there's that footage in there too, which is pretty amazing. So you get to hear him. Yeah. So I mean, it's pretty cool. We definitely went to town on it, and it's one of those discovery episodes. We try to throw in one real deep cut. Johnny Canine was one, in the past, and stuff like that. You may never heard of these wrestlers, but wow, their stories are super fascinating, and this is definitely one of the more fascinating ones for sure. And we had to do the spider gimmick for this too, which was a lot of fun to see.
Yes, and again, we're going to find out. Did you go to like Rick Baker or the special effects gurus or whatever for this, or?
No. We have a weird thing where we never have enough money or time to do anything digitally or any of that stuff. So we do it all in camera, and we built a very tiny, small ring, model ring, and we brought in tarantula, experts, who, and we used real spiders crawling over.
At least but at least you won't be able to see through the spiders like you could see through the Amazing Colossal Man, right?
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yep. So there you go.
Well, who's lucky number 7?
It's an episode we've wanted to do forever. One that we finally went ahead with, which is the Chris Adams story. Our first season had a bunch of stories centered around world-class championship wrestling. We had Brody, Von Erichs, Gino Hernandez, and Chris Adams played a part, obviously, in the Gino Hernandez story. And it was just something we really have always wanted to tell. He is he was the charming sort of British wrestler that came in to world class and was an amazing talent. He's also known for sort of pioneering the super kick. Yeah. One of the first people to do that. But he has this real sort of infamous Jekyll and Hyde sort of persona, someone who could be the nicest guy you've ever met. And then after a few drinks, he would become just a violent menace, is kind of the way I would put it. People described his eyes physically turning red, when he would get into that sort of dark side, no pun intended. But so we were able to speak with, and he also trained Stone Cold Steve Austin. Sorry, that's a huge footnote too.
Well, I just happened to bring that up. Yeah,
Yeah.
And a sad thing that their relationship did not last the test of time.
No, and we do get into that, but something I didn't realize. Unfortunately, Steve didn't partake in the episode, but it's very fascinating that after everything that all the chaos and destruction and everything that happened with Chris Adams, which I'm sure we'll get into, and the episode gets into, Steve really stepped in to sort of be almost a surrogate father to his children, which is pretty amazing. And something that I think would have been amazing if he would have wanted to speak about on camera, because they have a very close relationship, Chris's kids and Steve, to this day. So that's amazing. But yeah, it's, and then if you know, but the way that Chris tragically passed away is he got into a drunken altercation with his friend, who he was crashing at his house for a very long time. They were close friends and living together, and they got into an argument when Chris was in a, drunken, wild state of mind. And out of self-defense, his friend had to shoot him and wound up killing Chris. And so his friend Boo Ray is in the episode and details that, which is just absolutely chilling. So it is a very heavy episode, a very dark and heavy episode, maybe one of the heaviest of the season, but also does spotlight, Chris's career and his contributions to the business. And it's great hearing from his brother. His brother's in the episode, and and his family, his children, and just getting their perspective on Chris. I think it gives a more well-rounded view of the man.
Now, do me a favor, because Brian and I were a couple weeks ago, we were talking about the season 5 coming up. We couldn't remember exactly how the altercation happened we had Chris super kicking the female flight attendant over the drink cart.
Yeah.
And somebody falling out the door of the plane. Now, what was walk us through the plane incident? I'm trying to remember exactly how that unfolded.
That's a little bit of a conflating of two different things. Yeah. There is the incident on the plane, which Kevin Von Erich tells. He's in the episode as well, so he comes back to the show, which is awesome to have him. But he details the story as Chris was being belligerent about being cut off, and not being able to get any more alcohol on the flight. And the pilot came up to him, and Chris basically took I think he took like the pilot's arms, and was like held them, and then looked at him and said, "Feel the power," and then headbutted him in the face. And
feel the power.
Yeah, feel the power. And I think what happened after that was there was obviously authorities waiting for him when they landed, and he did jail time for it. He did some serious jail time for it. So that's one thing. And then the super kick thing is a story that is lived on as a tall tale that David Manning sort of tells quite enthusiastically and very entertainingly, but it's been disputed by others. I know Michael Hayes strongly disputes it, but there's a story in which Chris, when he was in Israel, and he was again belligerent after being cut off by a bartender, and then he super kicked the bartender's eye out. That's the story. He got upset and super kicked the bartender.
I've heard something about an eyeball over there too. There's always an eyeball involved.
Always an eyeball.
And it's always fun and games until the eyeballs pop out.
I know. You could do a dark side drinking game where every time you take a shot when an eyeball pops out of someone's head. Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. Also, with Chris, I could see him trapping the arms because Chris was a judo.
Yes.
Expert, of course, not to the level of his. Somebody on Twitter the other day, after we had been talking about it here on the program, said, "I didn't know Neil Adams, the judo guy, was related to Chris Adams." Apparently,
yeah.
Chris had somewhat of a rep for judo, but his brother was the real deal and was the celebrity in that world. But yeah, so you got a guy who can't control his temper when he's drinking, and he's also a judo expert and is the master of the super kick. So trouble's going to follow.
Yeah, that's right. Neil Adams is the brother who's in the episode too. So
and not the Batman artist that worked for DC Comics either. We're not talking about him.
R.I.P. By the way, Neil Adams.
Well, Chris's brother?
No.
The other one. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I'm fucking with you.
Yes.
And then moving along in our parade of terror, I can't wait till you get to one certain episode, but who's up in week 8?
Well, maybe it's Sherry Martell you're thinking of?
Oh, well, that's one. We'll go with Sensational Sherry, but
Yep.
this one is also near and dear to my heart. I imagine
Mhm.
I'll make a pop in or two.
You didn't make you're on the cutting room floor. No, I'm just kidding. Of course.
Hey, God, I was an integral part of setting her career back 2 years by managing her for a weekend.
No, it's great. Yeah, this episode too is another one we've wanted to do for a very long time. Super happy that we were able to, and it's an opportunity to also spotlight her as an amazing wrestler. You know, I don't think a lot of people my age knew that she had such an amazing in-ring career as a wrestler before she became known more as a manager. And this episode is especially emotionally heavy, shall we say, because of her family. We were able to speak to, I believe it's, her ex-husband, who she was with before she got into the wrestling business, and her son, whose, perspective is heavy on this whole thing because, Sherry was somebody that had a dream of becoming a wrestler and becoming a superstar. And she really kind of put that priority. That was the priority, as per her family was, not her family. It was wrestling. And so her family was sort of left behind as she pursued this dream. And so, it's a lot of heavy sort of emotions surrounding that. But also she's someone who also put her body through so much. When she was a performer, even when she was a manager, the bumps that she was taking was absolutely out of control. And you could tell she was in so much pain. And of course, at that time, pain led to medication, and medication, led to dependency. And, unfortunately that's the story, but it is also an amazing opportunity to be able to spotlight her as an incredible talent.
And that's, I think, I haven't seen this episode, so I'm going to go out on a limb here and predict that it may show again the problems that a lot of the talent, guys or girls, have later on when their careers are over and they've got either normal jobs or don't have a normal job and don't have insurance to where they can get some of this shit fixed. And there's no, beneficial fucking union or fund or whatever. Oh, you're an ex-pro wrestler and you need back surgery or whatever and need to get off this stuff, so, and have it fixed. Well, we'll just pay for it.
Exactly.
And it doesn't happen in the United States of America, as we all know. So, unfortunately, that's Sherry is probably a good piece of this is going to be illustrating that she was caught between a rock and a hard place toward the end as to what to do about this whole thing.
Absolutely. But talk about somebody who's just universally beloved too. Somebody who everybody, she's just a character, and everybody loved that about her. Just, she's such a unique, hilarious, funny, charming, irreverent, person, and everybody is universally loved Sherry.
And I can hold my hand up and say I'm part of that group.
Yes.
But as we are, go ahead.
I was just going to say you might not be part of the group of the next one, which is the Sandman.
Okay, well then I know what you're saving for last, but go ahead. Let's talk about this. I've said this. It's not that I don't like the person, but the gimmick. Mm-hmm. But let's face it, for ECW for that time period, that's why that gimmick got over. I don't know. Does he even admit to that it wasn't going to work anywhere else or in any other time, but for that time and that place, that was the thing that those people liked.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would say that he definitely is the quintessential ECW gimmick, for sure. And for my money, this might be a tough crowd here for this, but for my money, it's like, even as a kid watching this and, a guy who comes out to the ring for, 8 minutes and drinks an entire 6-pack of beer and smokes half a pack of cigarettes and makes himself bleed before he gets into the ring. There is a sort of, dirtbag performance art. associated with that always captured me. It's just something that was so unique. You never saw anything like it before. And I have to say the low budget camera equipment of the of ECW, the kind of grittiness, the texture that it gave that, it just all worked, for me. And so I would be dishonest if I didn't say that I wanted to do this because I was a fan as a kid. I was a fan of the Sandman as a kid, and we did work with him on the New Jack episode and had a great time with him, and just thought it would be interesting because we know he's been through a lot of crazy, he has a lot of crazy near-death experiences and wild stories battling addiction and violence in the ring and things and so on and so forth. So when we got to talking to him about it, it really seemed like this would be pretty compelling to do. And
that's what I got to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I wasn't a regular viewer of ECW, but I've probably seen all of the in-ring highlights of Sandman's stint there. But I don't know that. How does he fit the dark side, or is it now the new lighter side of the dark?
No.
Is this uplifting, or is this downtrodden, or kind of in the middle, or what is Sandman's outside the ring life looked like?
Oh, well, it was wild and crazy and full of extracurricular activities that, were pretty self-destructive. And everybody, it's not a secret. People know the excess of the excesses, shall we say, of folks in the ECW locker room and the drug use. And, each match is more crazier than the last, and that takes a toll, and you have to keep up with it and things like that. But one thing that is interesting that we do get into, that's just more into the, his career. I didn't know he was a Chippendales dancer. Did you?
What?
Before he got into wrestling.
Wait, what? Is that when they had the gimmick 99 beautiful men and one ugly one? What? How does that work? I mean, I saw him in the wetsuit when he was the Sandman with the surfboard and the white thing on his nose. But I didn't know he was. Was he Chip or was he Dale?
But he was a Chippendales dancer before all this, and he was arrested for being a male escort as well.
Oh my God!
For women, I didn't know this.
Well, thank you for adding that caveat there.
Well, I mean, and so it's like it's crazy that there's
still hope for me then. If somebody would pay him,
sure,
there's hope for me,
and so
I can start a new career.
Yeah, you never know. It's never too late. And so he, broke into the business, but we do get into, which I totally remember watching growing up, was the storyline between him and Raven, and something that we really like to examine on the show is the blurred lines aspect of kayfabe and all that stuff, and it's crazy that the Sandman got his entire family involved in the storyline. Back in the mid 90s, you had his wife became a character on screen, and his son,
she was the former Peaches.
That's right.
That correct? Yes.
Yeah, that's right. And she's involved in the storyline, and then his son, who is like, I don't know, 9 years old, becomes the Manson family disciple of Raven, and they had to keep up appearances and travel in separate cars and pull off this whole elaborate storyline that you're bringing your whole family into this crazy rock and roll lifestyle of wrestling. And so it's really interesting to hear their perspective, of
how's their relationship now?
It's definitely fraught, and that's a part of what we get into.
It's never happened before. Bring your wife and family into wrestling and everything's not sunshine, lollipops, rainbows, and waterfalls?
No. I mean, imagine being a 9-year-old kid and you're traveling to the next town. Oh, we got to wake up the kid, and Raven wants to shoot a promo at 3 a.m. in a playground with the kid, and we got to do it, and it's wild. It's wild. I mean, yeah. So it's another roller coaster episode for sure. So.
Well, and then by process of elimination, I believe I know what the final episode of season 5 of Dark Side of the Ring will be, but it will be the Black Saturday episode, is it not?
That's right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And of course, now I've got to give people the caveat for those who might tune in and think, "Oh my God, they're going to talk about all the stuff about Vince." Well, this was a scandal Vince was involved in 40 years ago, and
Mm-hmm.
much of the episode was finished by the time we found out his predilection for poop play and other types of debauchery. So that's gonna have to wait till season 6 probably, but season 5, everybody's going to get a good whiff of Vince McMahon's business practices and morals along with this episode, are they not?
Yeah. Yeah, this was filmed. We did this interview with you, I think it was last year, so it was before a lot of the the allegations and controversy and stuff. So yeah, this is one of Vince's first chess moves to take over the professional wrestling industry on a national scale. The hostile sort of, if you will, takeover of Georgia Championship Wrestling. And it was always something that we wanted to tell, or taking over the time slot, I should say. It was always a story that we wanted to tell, but it was a factor of trying to get enough people who are still around to tell the story and are able to tell, the story. Of course, we got to mention, I'm sure you guys talked about it on the program, but RIP to, Ole Anderson, who is a huge part of the story. Obviously, he wasn't in a medical, he wasn't, at the time we were doing the episode, he wasn't in a spot where he was able to appear on camera to tell his own story. But I have to say, his son Bryant did an amazing job in this episode.
Excellent.
Kind of being his surrogate, if you will, and he's very studied up on this subject, and you'll see he acts as a perfect proxy for his father.
Well, and obviously with Ole passing, last week or week before last, as they hear this now, we've been talking about it, in various ways, but the Black Saturday episode was the first time, and it's also newsworthy because MLW just didn't win. They got a settlement in their antitrust suit against the WWE. This was 40 years ago, almost to the month, that this happened. And
Right.
Vince did have a monopoly on pro wrestling on cable television in the United States. He had USA Network, he had TBS, and he had his WGN, I think, at the time also. So any superstation, any cable network in those early days that had wrestling, it was Vince's. And if he'd been able to sustain that, then there might not have been a war in the 80s or the 90s. But thankfully, the fans rebelled against seeing WWF style wrestling on TBS, and the NWA was able to get, back involved because Turner got involved in it. And obviously you're going to tell this on the episode, but but it was the first time that Vince tried and almost succeeded to take over the whole thing. And it was almost a rout.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of interesting voices on this episode. As I mentioned, Jerry Briscoe earlier, and there's a wild story involving, it's complicated to sort of summarize here, but ostensibly it led to, Ole Anderson and the Briscoes taking a blood oath in a hotel room to not essentially double cross each other during this whole incident. And that's crazy. And so this is a big story for Jerry Briscoe too, because he, ultimately did side with Vince on this and sold his shares. And it led to a lot of ill will amongst a lot of the promoters in the territories at the time. And he got a lot of death threats. And, so this is a very important story for him.
Well, and then also, and as much as I was rooting for Vince not to be on TBS at the time, as much as I love Jerry Briscoe,
yeah,
he was Jack was put in a bad position because another central character in this episode is Jim Barnett.
Yep.
And without Barnett involved in the Georgia promotion, the Briscoes realized that their shares, which were worth tens of thousands of dollars per point or whatever at that time, could be in the next short little while worthless, and they were going to lose their ass on that if they didn't take the offer.
And they weren't getting paid any dividends. Like they weren't getting money from the company at the time. So they were, equally also like kind of, either way, exactly. It would be worth nothing. Tommy Rich is in the episode. I can't remember his real name, but the referee Nick Patrick, we remember, of course.
Jody Hamilton's son.
Jody Hamilton Jr. Right? Is that?
Well, goddamn,
James Hamilton.
I first met him 40 years ago. I've never called him anything but Nick.
Me too. That's how I knew him, and of course, from TV. So he's in the episode, and then we have two folks who worked in the offices of Georgia Championship Wrestling that are very interesting to get their takes on it. One, Bobby Simmons, and the other was her name was Louise Cochran, and she worked. I think she was either. I think she was a secretary to Ole or something. And
Louise was the secretary / glue /
right.
office manager / anything that needs to be done in a timely fashion or without errors or spelling mistakes. Get Louise to do it.
There you go. So she's in the episode. So hearing from her is pretty compelling. Bob Roop is in the episode as well. So it's, trying to get basically everybody we can, and of course yourself, but trying to get everybody we can in the episode.
Oh, yeah. Susie said, trying to get everybody we can. We have no standards. We'll take anybody. You're in it. Thank you for that full-throated endorsement.
No.
But if people want to get a course now that Vince is in the news again perpetually for all of his own doing, if they want to get a course in how he initially fired the first shot and trying to assassinate all the other territories, the Black Saturday episode will wind up season 5 with a good primer in that.
Yeah, and one more thing, just as a teaser for the episode for people to tune in. It was pretty amazing when we did talk to Ole's son Bryant. He had unearthed this letter that's very historically significant, and it's from 1987. And it's a letter that Bill Watts wrote to Ole Anderson, after all this. And it's this amazing basic, decree saying, Ole, you were right about everything, about Vince, and you were right about Vince. What, you saw it before anybody else did about what Vince was going to do to this business. And that was a major vindication for Ole. And I think that little letter, which you'll see in the episode, is especially noteworthy in the context of the history of this whole thing.
I can't wait to see that. And as well, do we get to the bottom of Ole saying, well, fuck you and fuck Linda?
I can say we definitely get to the bottom of it. Yeah. I mean, it's in there. It's definitely in there.
That's the one thing. Ole was great at a lot of things, but probably the best thing was carrying a grudge.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, well, again, there you have it, folks. This season 5, Dark Side of the Ring on Vice TV, Tuesday nights at 10 o'clock Eastern or wherever in your local time zone. And is there a way? I've had people tweeting me saying, well, we don't have the cable anymore. Are you streaming? What's going on? Is there YouTube? How access for these programs later on?
Yeah. Basically, each episode is available, I believe, 24 hours or under on Amazon. You can purchase them individually, iTunes or Apple, on any streaming platforms, and then eventually the episodes make their way to Hulu if you have the streaming service there, which a lot of people do, and they show up there. That's kind of the best way to see them if you don't have Vice as a cable.
Well, there you go. And internationally around the world, those would work also. The streaming works, even if they can't see Vice TV in Bogota.
Yeah.
There you go. And how's Vice doing? I understand they withstood the repossession of the office furniture well, even though everybody's having a stand now, but they're still on the air.
Yeah, we're still here. We're still on the air.
They better take care of you guys. You got the only popular show on their network. Anyway, Dark, I won't let you make a comment on that, so you can keep the heat off yourself. Dark Side of the Ring, Tuesday nights, Vice TV, the biggest show ever held every week. And thank you, Evan Husney, for being a part of it. Tell Jason we said hello, and everybody watch every Tuesday night. You'll see me eventually.
Yes. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Well, there it is, Jim, your annual conversation with Evan Husney talking about the upcoming season of Dark Side of the Ring, a season that once again you will be featured on at least a few times.
A few times. It's a shame with all the things going on with the corporate structure at Vice. They got some fine programs over there at the TV outlet. Maybe, Brian, I'm asking you, should they sell the TV programs on the Vice TV branch there on Shopify, where they make money instead of losing money? Because Shopify is the big e-commerce global platform that you can just make money hand over fist if you're selling your products on Shopify.
Right.
Can't
I mean,
you?
all their shows are Dark Side of the Ring and then shows about cooking with weed. So I'm not sure how much of a market there'll be for some of that stuff. But if you are someone who has maybe not programming, but your own products or things you have the rights to sell, Shopify is the perfect partner for your online store.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
You don't even need rights. Apparently, you can curate products to sell from the other brands that you love at Shopify Collective, so you can basically sell other people's stuff. It says right here you don't have to sell just your own stuff anymore. Just willy-nilly sell shit out from under people. Guy comes home from work, opens his front door. He got no furniture in his house. You know why? Because you sold it on Shopify.
No, that's exactly not why. No, there will be no stolen merchandise or furniture sold on Shopify.
Nobody saw him steal it.
Let's not encourage people to sell stolen couches or any other things that they lifted.
Well, and the problem is the shipping also. But I'll tell you what, Shopify is your no excuses business partner. When you fuck up, they got no excuses for it. They'll bury you. But you can sell without needing to know coding or design. You just bring your ideas, and Shopify will take it from there and make a ton of money with your ideas and give you some of it. And Shopify can help you custom your online store to your style with gorgeous, flexible templates that are also hot as well as flexible. And with Shopify Magic, you can whip up captivating content that converts. It changes into all different types of things. Metastasizes, I believe, is the official term. And once you start selling, Shopify makes getting paid simple, but they accept every type of payment. And let's say somebody runs up a little short that month, they can't pay. Well, they'll send you over to your house. They'll send them over to your house to do some work to kind of work it off in a barter system.
That's not what they'll do.
Because they accept every type of, these people are going to pay up one way or the other. Do you want to make money or what?
Let's focus on that. Making money with Shopify, a wonderful partner, a wonderful friend of the show. No one's coming to anyone's house. I don't think there'll be these accounting issues that you're speaking of.
You can be optimistic, but every once in a while, some of these things happen. But Shopify grows with your business no matter how far or big you grow. You will not get away from them. No matter how far you go, how big you get, they're going to keep an eye on you. They've got an endless integration list. They're apparently integrated fully with third-party apps. What does that mean?
Endlessly.
Thanks to an endless list of integrations and third-party apps. They'll do all these things. Oh, from on-demand printing to accounting to chatbots. They've got chatbots.
How do they have a list that doesn't end?
Well, you never know really where to start and where to wind up, do you?
You start where you start.
That's like giving somebody directions and say, go down to the last stop sign and turn left. How do you know it's the last stop sign? Do you want marketing made simple? Shopify removes the guesswork. That's why we're sitting here guessing what the fucking answers to things are. But they've got built-in tools that help you create, execute, and analyze your online marketing campaigns. And they've got a single dashboard where you can manage your orders, your shipping, your payments from anywhere, and your speed, as well as...
And meet lots of singles.
You can meet lots of singles because it's a single dashboard. No married people are involved in that, right? That's just for the singles. Would you like to know how much this service costs, Brian?
I'm dying to know.
Almost nothing. Right now, you can sign up for a $1 a month trial period at shopify.com/JCE, the JCE all lowercase. That continues to be an issue. I don't know why. Shopify.com/JCE to grow your business no matter what stage you're in by signing up for a $1 a month trial. $1 a month. That's 3.3 cents per day. you can afford that by rummaging around in the couch. So if you want to retire early and be able to leave your wife and get a pretty one and be able to send your kids to college to get rid of them, make money now with Shopify.com/JCE.
Maybe not the proper motivation for the listeners, but if you just want to have a good business and support your family.
Say you want to hire a hitman and just.
No, let's not say that. Let's not say that. Unless it's Bret the Hitman Hart for a personal appearance.
Yes, and then see, you can sell personal appearances on Shopify.
Will you stop hitting that?
Well, it's because of all the money we're making.
All right, Shopify, JCE.
Yeah.
Not capitalized.
So, Brian, before we go any further with things, what in the world is happening at the Arcadian Vanguard network of fine programming, including the wrestling news and the 605 this fine week?
I hear they blew up Reunion Arena, but another fine week of programming on the Arcadian Vanguard podcast network, and information about all the shows on Twitter at Superpodcast or on Facebook at facebook.com/Arcadian Vanguard. A few notes. This week's episode is Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam, episode 300. I am the special guest. Hear me answering mailbag questions.
Wait a minute. Aren't you like exercising your EVP status by being a guest on one of your own administrated programs?
I'm not the EVP. I'm the president of Arcadian Vanguard, and I was asked to appear on the program. I made no request. I would never do such a thing.
Of course not.
But here it today. Lots of fun. McAdamPod.com, or look for Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam, episode 300 with the great Brian Last, wherever you find your favorite podcast. Also want to make mention of something coming up. Shut Up and Wrestle with Brian Solomon is doing a roundtable of former Titan Tower employees talking about the scandals of Vince McMahon, the culture of Titan Tower, and much more. Stay tuned for that. Go to SUAWpod.com or Shut Up and Wrestle with Brian Solomon, wherever you find your favorite podcast.
And by the way, these are normal people. These are not like people in the actual wrestling business, but these are civilians giving their thoughts on what the fuck was going on up there.
I just thought I was getting a job. Look what I was in for here. But hear more about that on Shut Up and Wrestle with Brian Solomon. Of course, keep up with what's happening in wrestling everywhere, every single day. Wake up and find out everything you missed or everything you want to get caught up on from the wrestling news. Get the free wrestling morning newscast every day, thewrestlingnews.com directly, or look for Arcadian Vanguard's The Wrestling News wherever you find your favorite podcast. No clickbait, no paywall, just the wrestling news. And of course, the 605 Super Podcast, The Mothership! Hey, where's the money sound effect now, buddy?
Yeah.
Go through the archive at 605pod.com, available wherever you find your favorite podcasts. The Mothership.
See, my money sound effect has a dollar sign on it. I'm looking for one that's got a cent sign on it. What would that sound like? Just jingle? Jingle?
Ching. I don't know.